Okay, so there's an idea on Yom Kippur. The first thing is that people have to know about Yom Kippur. There's a few misconceptions. First misconception is Yom Kippur is the happiest day of the year. It's an intense day. It's a challenging day, but it's a happy day. The analogy would be a guy who knows that he's guilty of various crimes, but if he goes to court and pleads his case properly, he will be completely forgiven. Now, a guy like that is probably not thinking about food. He's not thinking about anything other than pleading his case in front of a judge, because he could get, if he pleads it properly, he could get off of a death penalty. So a guy like that will go to court and he's going to plead his case. So the first thing you have to know, Yom Kippur is the day where we are cleansed. Now, there's one opinion in the Gemara that even if a person sins on Yom Kippur, just the very fact that Yom Kippur has come and gone cleanses a person. All right, obviously we have to not sin on Yom Kippur, and certainly not to eat on Yom Kippur. And just from a halachic point of view, if you have any doubt at all whether or not you could fast, first of all, if you got a health issue, so you speak to Rabbi Bradowitz and find out if you have to fast. Right? The first thing is if you're not allowed to fast, somebody who has to eat, let's say somebody's a diabetic or somebody has some other health issue, whatever it is, a heart condition, whatever it is, so then the halacha is you're not allowed to fast. Then your mitzvah is to eat. Your mitzvah is to eat. Number one. Number two is that the ninth, which is Tuesday, the mitzvah of the day is to eat. The Gemara says that Rabbi Akiva, there are only 2 days of the year that Rabbi Akiva would tell the students to leave the Beis Medrash and go home. One of them was Erev Pesach. The fathers had to go home to make sure the children slept so they could be up for the Seder, which, by the way, never worked by us. It never worked. The kids, when you tell kids to sleep, that's the last time they're going to sleep. It just never worked by us. So eventually we just gave up. Just see what happens at the Seder. Don't worry about it. They never worked. There was the minute you take off the pressure, then they all go to sleep. So that never worked. And the second day of the year where they tell people to go home early was on Erev Yom Kippur, because the mitzvah of the day is to eat. The Gemara says somebody who eats and drinks on the 9th, it's as if you have fasted on the 9th and on the 10th. Assuming you fast on the 10th, which is Yom Kippur. Because I think it's pretty intuitive. A person feels what's more cleansing, to eat and drink or to fast? Everybody would agree that fasting is more intense and more cleansing. So if you eat and drink on the 9th, it's as if you fasted on the 9th. One of my favorite mitzvahs, right? If you eat and drink on the 9th, it's as if you, why is that? Why does there mitzvah to eat and drink? So there's several reasons. Reason number one is that number one, it strengthens us for the fast. Number two, it makes the fast a little bit more challenging, because the more your stomach expands before a fast, then to a certain extent you're a little hungrier when you don't eat. So it does add a little bit, just a little bit to the challenge. And number three is the idea, a guy who's on trial for his life. He does it. It's not that he doesn't want. He tries not to eat. He got no appetite. The guy's going into court. Guy's on trial for his life. The guy's about to go in for a serious surgery. He's not hungry. He's just not hungry at that point. You're not thinking about food. If we can eat on the 9th, knowing that we're going into a Yom Kippur, that means we're showing that we have confidence. That we will be cleansed on Yom Kippur. That we have confidence in the kapara. And a person has to believe that Yom Kippur is a bechaper. Yom Kippur is a kapara. Yom Kippur atones. We have to believe it atones. And if we can eat, get ourselves to eat. I once read about a guy who was on death row. There's a guy that they were executing, and I think in Texas or whatever it was. So he's this guy, your last meal, right? Most people, if you give a guy your chance for a last meal, what are you going to have at your last meal? Or who could possibly eat when you're about to face a firing squad or the electric chair or whatever it was? And I remember this guy that they asked the guy, what would you like for his last meal? He said he wants fried chicken and pizza. I remember reading it. I think it was in Time magazine. I remember reading it. I got queasy when I read it. Right? This is what you're thinking about. You're about to get killed. This is what you're thinking. How can you fried chicken on a good day? I can't handle it. Fried chicken before you die, and pizza. I mean, if we put you in an electric chair, you're gonna have heartburn from it. How could you? It's a terrible way to go. You don't need the electric chair for that. That's enough to kill you. You need the electric chair for it. That alone will put you away. I remember reading about this. My goodness, that's what you're thinking about. So that's part of the idea. The reason that we eat and drink on the 9th is we show that we have the confidence that we will be cleansed on Yom Kippur. That's idea number one. And it's a mitzvah, by the way. It's like everything else in Judaism. Shabbos is the one day you shouldn't be sad. That's probably our saddest day of the week, right? The funniest joke you hear all year is going to be on Tisha B'Av. Right, there's almost a Yetzer Hara that goes, and all of a sudden you wake up Yom Kippur on the 9th. I just don't have an appetite today. That's the way it always is. Always at the wrong time, because there's got to be a Yetzer Hara, something stopping us. I think the Vilna Gaon, they say, used to eat raisins all day, or a little something, just to fulfill the mitzvah of eating on the 9th. So the Vilna Gaon would eat something, like eat raisins or something like that. There's some people put a sucking candy in their mouth just to fulfill the mitzvah of eating all day on Erev Yom Kippur. And then you have the main meal later in the afternoon. That's the idea of the 9th. That say if you eat and drink on the 9th, it's as if you fasted, and then you fast on the 10th. It's as if you fasted on the 9th and on the 10th. That's idea number one. Now, yeah, go ahead.
When the Rav says to eat throughout the day, do you mean mamish all the time throughout the day?
No, yeah, as much as you can. You don't want to get, it shouldn't be what's called achila gasa. Achila gasa is where you get to the point where you've eaten so much that you can't even look at food, or food becomes repulsive to you. And it's not a good idea to do that even before the fast. Because before the fast, then you get to shul, you can't eat. You should eat to the point that you're satisfied. It's not going to help you anyway. It's not going to help you anyway. You need a little bit more, a little bit less. By 3 in the afternoon the next day, your stomach's going to be growling, guaranteed. Right? In drinking also, take a few drinks and go to shul. It's not going to help you. You're going to be thirsty. You're going to be thirsty until you get into the davening and the thirst will go away. And then at night it's a little harder because when you go to sleep, suddenly you're going to find when you go to sleep on Yom Kippur night, you've never been so thirsty in your entire life, right? It goes away. It's all psychological. Okay, that's idea number one. Idea number two is that the Shari Tshuva by Rabbeinu Yonah, the Rishon. So Shari Tshuva asks the following question. He says, here we are, we're going into Yom Kippur, and we all know, there's a pasuk that says, Lev Yodea Maras Nafsho. A heart senses the bitterness of its, a person knows in his heart of hearts, what's he guilty of, and what's he done wrong. We know none of us are the Chafetz Chaim just yet. And the person knows that, and I know my thoughts, and I know what I've done, and I know what I've seen, and I know that I've far from being, the Adam HaSholem, a perfect human being. So what chance have we got, honestly? Okay, the truth of the matter is that the same way that we know what we've done wrong, we've also done plenty right. I mean, you've been sitting and learning in the yeshiva, so every word of Torah is a mitzvah. You're accumulating mitzvahs. On the other hand, we're not without our flaws. So the Shari Tshuva says, so what chance have we got going into Yom Kippur? What chance have we got? So Shari Tshuva says, he quotes a Gemara, and I want to tell you this because it's an extremely important concept. And there's a Gemara that says, Kol hamavir al midosav, ma'avirin lo al kol psha'av. Which means if you're willing to overlook the wrongs that people have done to you, Hashem overlooks all your averas. Kol hamavir al midosav, ma'avirin lo al kol psha'av. And the Shari Tshuva, Rabbeinu Yonah, refers to that concept, which comes out of the Gemara. The Gemara says, Kol hamavir al midosav, ma'avirin lo al kol psha'av. If you're willing to overlook, Hashem overlooks all your averas. The Shari Tshuva says, V'zohi Pesach tikva nechbad me'od. This is a glorious ray of hope. That's what he calls it. It's a glorious ray of hope. That means I'm certainly not perfect, and I don't even know if I've done proper tshuva. But if I'm willing to overlook the mistreatment people have perpetrated against me, then Hashem will overlook my misdeeds as well. Now, there's another Gemara that says, somebody who says Hashem overlooks will have his life overlooked. I mean, this idea that, well, he's a forgiving God and everything will be okay, No, doesn't work that way. There's no free passes. There's no free passes here. And there's a God is midas hadin. Din is justice, and God carries out strict justice. Unless you've earned within the justice, you earn mercy, but that's part of justice. And even in court, if you express remorse in court, so the judge has the room he's got wiggle room to let you off if you express remorse in court. You know that? If you go before a judge, they're accused of a crime, and you've done the crime. You've admitted you've committed the crime. One guy goes in there and says, yeah, I would do it again in 5 minutes, right? Versus another guy who says, I feel bad, it was a one-time slip-up, I shouldn't have done it. If the judge is convinced you're sincere, part of the legal system, now with this built into the legal system, the judge has room to say, well, you were going to let off and you were not because you didn't express remorse and you did. And there's room for that in court. The judge, that's part of that's built into the system. It's not a judge just being a softie. That's part. So built into Hashem's justice, I mean, you hear the irony of it, part of din is rachamim. Right? There could be justified rachamim. Right? Justified rachamim. That's one of the reasons in the generation of the flood, where there was moral corruption, complete immorality. Right? They would give our world a good run for its money, competing with 21st century American Supreme Court decisions. Right? So they would give us a run for our money. Now, what was the thing that put them away in the generation of the flood? What does it say? What was the final thing, the final act or their final misdeed, flaw, that brought about the final decision to destroy the world? Anybody remember? Gezel, theft. Right? Now, what's wrong objectively? What's worse, immorality or theft? Which is worse? Immorality, yeah, but theft is not in Torah law. Immorality is a capital crime. What do you call it? Either getting involved with a married woman or various forms of perversions. It's capital. It's a capital offense. Stealing is not a capital offense. You either pay double, you pay six. So why was stealing the thing that sealed their fate? Was because of theft. Stealing, gezel. What they were called is gezel. I was a little kid. I was about 5 years old. I was in Cheder. I was living in Israel at the time. And I was starting to learn Chumash, Parshas Noach. My grandfather, Olav Hashem, he was visiting at the time, and he was European. My grandfather was European, and he also had a bridge. You know, he didn't have teeth. He had a bridge in his mouth. So he was teaching me Chumash, and we were learning Parshas Noach. And I was a little kid. I was 5 years old. Little kids don't have a different take on things in life. And we were learning about the Aveira. My grandfather said to me that the sin of the generation of the flood he was talking was gezer. As a little kid, it sounded like he was saying gezer, which is carrots, right? It was gezel. The way he pronounced it, it came out gezel, like that. So I was a little kid thinking, well, I don't know, I like carrots. I mean, I'm not sure exactly why carrots did them in. You know, I couldn't get, I didn't even bother asking. But I just remember thinking something about carrots was the flaw of the generation of the flood. I couldn't. Okay, so it was gezel. Gezel is theft. Why is that? So the commentaries explain like this. There's a what's that bird that takes fish out of the water? A pelican. Pelican. So a heron, a pelican, whatever it was. There's this pelican, and he grabs a fish. And he says to this fish, I'm going to swallow you. You're my breakfast. I'm going to swallow you. The fish starts begging, please, no, I don't want to die. No. He says, no, I'm hungry. I'm going to swallow you. And he's starting to soften up. The pelican's thinking, okay, maybe I'll give him another chance. And while this fish is begging, all of a sudden, another fish that he had swallowed comes flying out of his mouth. This fish had swallowed a different fish. And he's begging, please, no, bloop. And out comes the fish that he had swallowed. And the pig says, whoa, you have no trouble swallowing. I can swallow, gulp, gulps them down. Why? Because you don't have a right to ask for mercy if you yourself aren't merciful. So in the generation of the flood, maybe they could have had some sort of reprieve for their immorality. Beg, do tshuva. But if you yourself are cruel and unmerciful, so how could you come to God and say, well, be merciful? Okay. So the Gemara says, If you're willing to over it. Now, gentlemen, you have to understand something. If the effect of anything is so powerful, it's a rule in Torah. If the effect of whatever the action is so powerful, that means that the thing triggering off the effect cannot be easy. Because if it's easy, it wouldn't be such a powerful effect. So to be maver on the midos means I'm willing to overlook how people have wronged me. Now this means a guy keeps taking your parking space every day, and you don't make an issue out of it. Right? You don't slash his tires, as satisfying as that would be. Right? You overcome you don't let the air out of his tires. A guy owes you, a guy messed you over in business, and you're willing to overlook it. You forgive the guy, right? Somebody messed up an opportunity for you, a job opportunity. He messed you up, and you're willing to overlook it. We're talking about difficult things. And then, by the way, this includes family relationships, which are the most difficult, right? Brothers, sisters-in-law, mothers-in-law, father-in-law. These are parents with all and you're willing to get past it. You're willing to overlook it. Then Hashem overlooks the other. I'll tell you an unbelievable story. The altar of Slobodka. You've heard of the altar of Slobodka, the original Reb Nosson Tzvi Finkel. So he was the altar of Slobodka, and he was called he was the founder of the so famous Slobodka Yeshiva. So there was a student in the yeshiva, Ruvain, who he got engaged. It was a shidduch. He got engaged to a girl whose father was a wealthy rav of a certain town. So A, he had support now in order to continue learning, and B, he had a position waiting for him when his father-in-law would pass away. He had a position waiting. It was considered a very excellent shidduch. Shimon was a boy in the yeshiva, and he was jealous of Ruvain's shidduch. So he went to the future father-in-law, the documented incident. He went to the future father-in-law. He told the future father-in-law, he made up a story about Ruvain, some horrific story, and he told the father-in-law, and the father-in-law heard the story, immediately dissolved the shidduch. He said, forget it, I don't want this guy for my daughter. After that, World War I broke out. And the entire Slobodka Yeshiva disbanded during World War I. There was complete upheaval all over Europe. They disbanded. They were all over the place for about 5 years. After 5 years, when World War I finally ended, they started regrouping. They came back to the Slobodka Yeshiva. So this Ruvain comes back to the Yeshiva 5 years later, and he comes in to see the altar of Slobodka. And they start schmoozing, and after a few minutes, the altar says, by the way, Ruvain, I have a letter here that was written to me by Shimon. And Shimon asked me to intercede on his behalf to ask forgiveness. He asked me to intercede, to ask forgiveness, because he knows he did a horrific thing 5 years ago. So Ruvain says, yeah, I forgive him, forget it, it's over with. He said, no, Ruvain, listen. I know that it hurt then, and I know that it probably still hurts now. And I'm asking you if you're truly able to forgive him. So Ruvain closes his eyes for about 10 minutes. After 10 minutes, he opens his eyes and says, Rabbi, I have searched every chamber of my heart, and I could tell you that I have no grudges against him. I forgive him with a full heart. So the altar says to him, I see on your face you're telling me the truth. Which means that right now you're being mavir on your midos. You're being willing to overlook. And the Gemara says, Kol mavir al midos, mavir no kol pshav. That if you are overlooking, then your averas are forgiven. Which means you have a clean slate right now. Which means that you're a tzaddik gomor. You're a complete tzaddik, and therefore I want you to give me a bracha. This would be roughly the equivalent of one of us walking into Reb Chaim Kanievsky and him Zatzal and him telling us he wants a bracha. Oh, you're the guy from Ohr Somayach. Yeah, I want a bracha. I've been waiting for you. Okay, can you give me a bracha? So the altar of Slobodka was not a humorous person at all. He was a very serious person. He said, you're a tzaddik, I want you to give me a bracha. So this Ruvain says, no, Rebbe, it's not for me to give you. He said, I want you to give me a bracha. He says, okay, I can't turn him down. He says, okay, Hashem should help. No. Put both of your hands on my head and give me a proper bracha. And he wouldn't let him go till the bacher gave him a bracha. Right? See, the concept, Aaron, hold for a few. Aaron, the concept of being maver and the midos. Now, look what he did to earn that. You're talking about a guy who messed up his life, and he's willing to overlook it. So then HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now, there are parameters here. There are parameters. Somebody owes you money, you don't have to overlook the money that he owes you. You could, I actually had an incident, I asked Rabbi Bradowitz, I forgive the guy for messing me up. I don't overlook the money. He still owes me the money. I forgive him for the aggravation he caused me. That I'm willing to overlook the aggravation. I don't have any obligation to just say, all right, you don't owe me the money, right? Sometimes where you have a squabble with a neighbor and you just let it go so you'll avoid that, that's different. But a guy clearly owes you money, that he borrowed money from you, you have no obligation to just say, well, keep the money. That you have no obligation for, except Shemitah, you have no obligation to keep the money. That's what it means, Kol HaMavra Midosam Avrin Al Kol Pshav. Now, I'm going to tell you something else. There was a story circulating, this is a story in two parts. There's a story circulating in Israel, this goes back probably about 15 years ago. There was a couple that didn't have children for many years. Every year, the husband would go to Reb Chaim Kanievsky to get a bracha. In Rosh Hashanah, get a bracha that they should have children. Gave him a bracha every year, no children. He comes in one Rosh Hashanah, he says to Reb Chaim Kanievsky, what's happened, what can we do? Reb Chaim says to him, I don't know, apparently the gates of heaven are closed to my brachas, there's nothing I can do for you. He says, but Rebbe, what should we do? He says, the only thing I can tell you is you have to find somebody who's being insulted, and while he's being insulted, he's willing to overlook the insult and get a bracha from him. Maybe that'll help, because he's on a high madrega. I mean, the guy says, okay, where are you going to find somebody in the middle of getting insulted? You got to find somebody, you got to hope he's getting insulted, and he doesn't say anything. All right, so the first place he goes to shul. Because there's likely to be somebody who's getting upset with somebody. Right? So he goes to shul, that sort of. Okay. About 2 months later, he's at a wedding. And he's got a friend, he's sitting with a friend of his at his wedding. His friend rents an apartment somewhere in Bnei Brak. And all of a sudden, the wedding hall opens, the landlord comes in, and he starts insulting his friend. He just starts making up all sorts of things. You break things, and he's yelling at his friend in public. He's shaming him in public. And his friend is sitting there, he's not saying anything. And he's about to start to answer. I mean, how much could you take? After 10 minutes, he's about to start saying something. The guy grabs him, he says, don't answer. Right? So the landlord blows off steam, turns around, he walks out. And he turns to the guy and says, give me a bracha. He says, what? He says, Reb Chaim Kanievsky said you should give me a bracha. It's like, oh, well, that's different. Why'd you say so? So the guy gives them a bracha, they should have children. 10 months later, they had a son. True story. That was a story that was circulating all over Israel, that story with the guy, because the guy was being ma'aver in his midos. That's Ad Kan HaKafa Aleph. That's the first story. Okay. The second story was this 9-year-old kid who was being picked on in school. For good reason. Apparently he was a bit of a nerd, and he was being picked on in school. And he was being picked on at home also by his brothers. And the Rebbe in the school noticed that when the kids would start to pick on him, he would start muttering something under his breath. Every time he got picked on, he was bullied, and he'd start muttering something. So the Rebbe understood he's cursing out to kids who are picking on him. So the Rebbe calls his father, and he says, Shimmy's getting picked on, and I'm trying to put a stop to it, but in the meantime, my goodness knows what he's cursing them with. Every time I notice that he's cursed. So the father says, yeah, I noticed this at home also with his brothers. His brothers keep picking on him, and he also... So I'll deal with it. So Shimmy comes home, and the father says, okay, Shimmy, I got a call from the Rebbe. Every time you get picked on, we're trying to put a stop to it, and it's not right, but you can't curse people. What is it that you're saying? He says, I'd rather not say. So he says, yeah, but I'd rather you do say. Now tell me exactly what you're saying. So this 9-year-old kid, he says to him, well, you know that story with Reb Chaim Kanievsky with the couple that didn't have children? And he told the guy to go get a bracha. So I realized that when I'm being picked on, if I don't respond, I have the koch to give brachas. So what I do is I go to all the local shuls and I read a list of all the people who are sick and I memorize their names. And every time I get picked on, I start saying a tefillah for these sick people that they should get better. That's how I remember. It's a 9-year-old kid. It's a 9-year-old kid. So if a person understands, you got the koch. At that moment, a person's got the koch on Yom Kippur to overlook. Now, obviously, we can't overlook everything. We're not going to be perfect overnight. But if we make a commitment to try to make this part of our avodas Hashem, that's a big advantage that we have. That's a major advantage that we have. Even if I'm not perfect in other areas, at least I have a chance. I'm willing to overlook. And by the way, this applies in marriage. It's probably the hardest place it applies. And it applies with families, and it applies with the younger brothers, and it applies with people taking, it applies in the yeshiva dormitory situation, it applies with guys making noise at night or guys cutting you in line in the lunchroom. Not everything in life has to be made an issue out of. And sometimes, now, I want to take this a step further because this is an extremely, extremely powerful concept. There's a Gemara that says, you've heard of Rabbi Akiva. Everybody's heard of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva had a Rabbi Eliezer Agadol. He's called Rabbi, the great Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer Agadol, who was the top Talmud of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. He was Rabbi Akiva's Rebbe. So the Gemara says there was a drought. And there was a drought. And Rabbi Eliezer Agadol davened for the Amud. He became the Shliach Tzibur. And nothing happened. He davened. There was no response. So Rabbi Akiva took over. Said Avinu Malkeinu. He said two Avinu Malkeinu. It started raining. So everybody started, they started murmuring. You know, maybe Rabbi Eliezer Agadol is not what he's cracked up to be. If you're Rabbi Akiva is great. A bas kol came out. A heavenly voice came out. So Gemara in Tainus on Daf Chaf Hey. A bas kol came out and said, Lo mipnei shezeh gadol mizeh. It's not because Rabbi Akiva is greater. Rather, it's because Rabbi Akiva is mavir on his midos, and Rabbi Eliezer isn't mavir on his midos. Zeh mavir al midosav, zeh eno mavir al midosav. Which begs the obvious question, which is what?
How does he not be greater?
That he's greater. if you're willing to overlook, then you are greater. Isn't that true? Right? Logically, then you are greater. The answer is, first of all, the Basko is referring to Torah scholarship. It's not because Rabbi Eliezer Akiva is a greater scholar, because he's got a certain character trait. But there's more to it than that. There are two approaches in life. There's one approach which is called the approach of emes. Did we speak about this? We haven't spoken about this. There's one approach in life which is the path of emes. Emes means I'm a man of the law. I hold myself to a high exacting standard, but I hold others to an exacting standard too. You took my parking space. I'm going to let you know about it. I'm going to let you know about it. I'm not going to let it go. I'm going to let you know. By the way, you took it. Sometimes people do this even when it doesn't make a difference anymore. You know, you have a visitor in town who once took your parking space. I just want to let you know what you did. You took my parking space. That guy's not going to be in town for another 100 years. I just got to let you know. I can't let it go. I got to make sure that you know that you wronged me. I got it for the record. I got it. My wife told me she was once at a wedding. She was once at a wedding, and some lady was sitting at a table. She got up to go schmooze with somebody. So this other lady came over to talk to the ladies at the tables, and she sits down in her seat. And this other lady comes back. I happen to know the lady. She got a bit of an edge. And she comes back. And so as soon as she came back, the lady who took her seat gets up to let her out. So she kind of gave a huff. She goes, she walks away a few steps. Then she comes back. And she says to this lady who had already gotten up, she's like, for the record, don't ever sit in my seat again. Now, I'm not sure which record they're keeping, and I'm not sure what when this is ever going to happen again, that she will take her seat at a wedding that they happen to be at the same way, but you got to get it out of say. I got to say it, right? So there's a path of emes. The advantage is that you hold yourself to a very exacting standard. The problem is you hold other people to an exacting standard too. It's a valid approach in life. It's a valid approach, but you have to understand the consequences. Rabbi Eliezer was from Beis Shammai, was the path of din, the path of emes. So when he's davening for mercy, and it's the Jewish people don't deserve rain, so then there's no wiggle room. You hold everybody to a path of to the letter of the law standard. Letter of the law doesn't allow rain to come down. Rabbi Akiva's maver on his midos. That's what we call the path of shalom. I'll sacrifice my rights for the sake of peace. Now, you're willing to sacrifice, that means that you're willing to overlook, then Hashem's willing to overlook. So, by the way, guess which one is harder? It's not even close. It's this far apart. The path of emes, that's the easiest thing. The path of shalom, that you don't say anything. By the way, this includes your kids in the house. Daddy, I broke my glasses. How did you break it? Well, I wanted to see how far they could bend. They don't bend as far as I thought. Right? So now what are you going to do? You're going to give the kid a whole earful. What, you never broke your glasses as a kid? You know, my glasses I broke, if I had a nickel for every pair of glasses I broke. Okay, he did wrong. Your wife spent a little too much on the credit card. And she knows. You got to say something. You got to say something. Somebody left the lights on in the house, right? Oh, the lights. Lights. Anybody around here turn off lights? Am I the only one around here who turns off lights? Right? Never heard that music? Never heard that music? Right? Then you get that. Then you hear that music growing up. I want to tell you something. I promised myself that when I'm a father, I'm not going to do it. I broke that promise. I broke that. You know why? I'll tell you what it is. I'll tell you what. Even if I made a calculation, let's say everybody would leave on all the lights all day, every day for an entire month. You know what it would cost me on my electric bill? Probably another $7. I can afford it. It's not the money. It's not the money. It's the fact that you're out there working, you're trying to make a living, you're working your kishkas out, and they just don't care. That's all it is. They just don't care. You know, you wake up in the morning and somebody left the bar of soap in the Negelwasser cup in the sink in the kitchen. So the soap has gone on a 24-hour diet, right? There's been sudden drastic weight loss on that bar of soap. You know, and you just go, you ever say, you've never seen it? When you see it? Or somebody doesn't cap the shampoo. They take a shower. All you got to do is push the cap down this much to cap the shampoo. So they don't cap the shampoo. So what happens? The next guy takes a shower, reaches for the shampoo, knocks it on the floor, and half the bottle of shampoo spills out. Why? Because one person didn't cap the shampoo. It could drive you nuts. It could drive you nuts. It's not that much money, honestly. It really doesn't cost you that much. It's the fact that hey, you're working with me or you're working against me. That's where it's coming from. No lights. That was like, it's like, you know, just sabotage the entire electric supply of the city, and you'll be okay. That's what it means, the path of Shalom. So a person approaches Yom Kippur and decides, I'm going to incorporate this into my personality. I'm going to try to be this kind of person. You're not going to succeed 100% of the time. You're not going to succeed 100% of the time. It's a very hard thing. But gradually, you make steps. You're willing to let it go. Just let it go. You don't have to say everything. Yeah, go ahead, Mir.
I mean, it seems to be that in certain times it's a fine line between what you should actually consider to say and when it's just let it go.
Right. It is a very fine line of knowing when am I being taken advantage of. I'm just being taken advantage of, and I'm being spineless, right? And when am I? It is a fine line. A lot of it has to do with how you're going to feel afterwards. Also, I will let it go. If I let it go, and then later on it's just going to come back worse, then I'm not holding at that level yet. It's like many things, it's like taking on a stringency in halacha. You know, there are chumras. Should I take on the chumrah or not? Should I be machmir or not? If you're machmir and it leaves you tense, then you're not holding by taking on the chumrah. If you're machmir and it leaves you energized, I feel good about the chumrah, that's something else. If I'm given to somebody and it just creates a festering resentment, I'm probably not holding by that level. If you give in and you feel good about it, I feel good, I gave in, I'm big. I'm not little, I'm big. I gave in, I didn't say anything. That's something else. That's something else. And you have to know when, you know, there's a statement in the Gemara, right? Rabbi, I think it was Rabbi Zera. They asked him, to what do you ascribe your long life? Among other things, he said, I never got upset in my home. To me, that is, you know, there's stories about Amoraim bringing the dead to life. You know, that's child's play. That I could do. Right? Bring the dead to life. Big deal. Right? To never get upset in your home, to never get impatient, to never snap at anybody in your home, that's science fiction. That's science fiction. Never. So this applies in many areas. Let's say, you know, the classic example, there are always these stories about the wife serves a terrible food. Right? It's oversalted or it's burnt, and the husband's a tzaddik and he just eats it and he doesn't want to hurt his wife's feelings. Right? You know, there are stories like that. You know, the husband, okay. So people say, well, should I do it or not? The answer is it depends. Because if you did it, and then the next time you have a squabble with your wife, You're like, you know what? You're careless with money, and you don't know how to cook either. You better tell your wife right away that the food is burnt. Don't be a tzaddik, which is going to end up having if you're the type of guy who you could just, you'll never bring it up again. It's gone. Once you've given in, it's gone. And it is. It's a very fine line. It's a very fine line. Where is it? Where do you draw that line between being pushed around? The Mishnah. I'll tell you. There's a Mishnah in Pirkei Avos that says, "Heve kal larosh v'noach latishchores." Somebody who is white-haired, somebody who's older, it should be very easy for you to get up and do whatever he needs. V'noach latishchores. Somebody who's got black hair, a younger person, you should be comfortable with him. What that means is like this. There are certain things which are extreme. Let's say your grandfather's in the house, or an old man is in the house. He says, "Could you do me a favor? Could you go up to the 3rd floor and get me my sweater? I'm a little cold." Your Zadie asks you, an older woman, an older man asks you, you run up to get the sweater for them. What if you're sitting there with your brother watching TV, and your brother says, "Hey, do me a favor, go up and get my sweater, will you?" Get it yourself. You don't want to get your sweater. That's usually how fights start. That's how fight. I'm not your slave. That's already extreme to do something like that. That's not normal. So there is a line. You have to know where the line is. It's very subtle. There's no definition. There's no clear definition.
No, but I mean, also I think perhaps also in some occasions we do see that it could be very for the growth of the person, and you think that you would like to tell the person in the right way.
It's a judgment. It's very hard. It's very subtle. Very subtle. It's a concept, and there are times we certainly could. A guy who cuts you in line in the lunchroom, a guy who stepped ahead of you in line in the lunchroom, you don't have to say anything. Yeah, you could work on it. I don't have to say anything, right? It's hard as heck, right? And then I'm going to grab the schnitzel off his plate when he's not looking. It's the hardest thing in the world. But you don't have to say anything. And every time a guy took the seat that you were about to seat in, or a guy said, you don't have to say anything. Yeah, there's certain things. When it comes to bigger issues, then it's tricky. Yeah, go ahead.
In marriage, right? Let's say someone's wife does something, not to push him around, okay? But let's say she would do something that bothers him continuously. It happens again, he swallows it. It happens again, he swallows it. What should propel him to keep going and let it go?
In general, in marriage, the rule is men have to let things go. But, especially in marriage, you have to know yourself, is it going to come out later or it's not? And that's a judgment. For the Chafetz Chaim got married. He got married a second time. His first wife was nifter. He remarried. The first sukkah after he remarried, his wife had him build the sukkah. So he built the sukkah, and she said, "You know what? I don't think I like it over there. I want it over there." So he took it down and he rebuilt it somewhere else. And she said, "You know what? I actually liked it in the first place." And he just rebuilt it. Didn't say a word. That's the Chafetz Chaim, right? For another person, if a wife wants, it's okay. I'll do it once. If I move it over, then she says, "Well, no, I like it in the first place." Lady, that's not happening, right? I'm not the Chafetz Chaim right now. So I always tell guys, when you get married, by the way, this is give you a golden piece of advice, and you should pay me for this. Checks, Kaplan, Kaplan. We take checks and credit cards, right? When you move into your first home, when you get married and you move into your first home with your wife, she's going to ask you to move the couch and the furniture because I need to see it. What it looks like that, and if it's over there. And your response is going to be, well, it looks exactly the same as over here, but over there, right? That's what your response is going to be. And then what you're going to do is you're going to do it anyway. And you're going to move the couch and the break. You're going to move it all over to the other wall. And then she is very likely to say, "I actually liked it right back there first," right? And then you're going to go and you're going to move it right back there like a good little doobie, right? And don't say anything because you're going to do it anyway, so just do it with a smile. True or not true, Moshe? You're going to do it, so just do it with a smile. So that's the first step. After that, it's very tricky. It depends on who you are as a person. My rule is if it's going to come out later, so get it taken care of now. Not everybody is a tzaddik.
Taking care of how?
It's got to be brought up subtly and gently and tactfully, and then anyway you're going to end up apologizing. But what do you call it? So marriage is a whole different ballgame. I'll tell you a story. It's an unbelievable story. There's a guy who his son went off to yeshiva. This guy had been with the Mir Yeshiva. You know, the Mir Yeshiva in World War II, they went through Shanghai. They were in Shanghai for 5 years. Okay, then the guy finally came to America. He got married, he had a family. His 20-year-old son went off to yeshiva in a different town. Okay, son goes off to yeshiva. The father comes over to visit him after a couple of weeks. Now this man, the father, he had a unique characteristic. He never made any issue over food. He had no food preferences. Didn't matter, white meat, dark meat, milk, flesh, so. No, it just didn't care. After, I guess, if you've been through World War II, food is not that big in it. Okay, so he goes to visit his son in yeshiva, and he says to his son, after a while, he's talking to his son and the teachers, the Rabbi and everything. So finally says, Dad, you want to eat some lunch? He says, yeah. He says, what have you got? I say, I got some elbow macaroni. He says, maybe you have something else. He says, how about some eggs? He says, yeah, eggs is fine. And his son was shocked. They'd never heard his father ever make a food preference, So he said, Daddy, he said, why didn't you want the elbow macaroni? He says, well, when we were in Mir in Shanghai, the weather there, it's very hot and balmy, extremely humid, extremely balmy. The food that we ate was infested with slugs. Every few bites, we had to pull these slugs out of our food, right? So elbow macaroni reminds me of slugs, so I prefer not. So the kid's jaw drops open. Why? Father's been married 25 years. For 25 years, his wife has been making elbow macaroni twice a week, and he never said a word, right? So I told this story. My wife and my mother were both at the table. I told them on a Shabbos at the table. They both had the same reaction. If I ever make you something that reminds you of slugs, you tell me. Don't be a tzaddik at my expense. That was the what do you call? Don't. See, you have to know who you are. You have to know who you are. I just wanted to tell you one last story. I just heard this yesterday. A remarkable story. The going into Yom Kippur, the Queen of England. So she used to go. She had these palaces all over the place, but she used to go where she was born. Apparently, she was raised in a place called Balmoral, which is in Scotland, and that was where she liked to go. She would dress in regular casual clothing, and she would go mix around the people, and nobody knew who she was. Incognito, she'd sit there. I guess people didn't expect to see the Queen, so she goes there. She had like one secretary who used to go with her. So she goes to this park, and there's an older couple sitting on a bench. So she sits down on the bench, and she starts schmoozing with them. Where are you from? They say, we're from London. So she says to them, have you ever seen the Queen? So they go, no, we've never seen the Queen. What about you? She goes, no, I've never seen the Queen either, which is true. She can't see herself except in a mirror. She goes, no, but this guy, I think he's seen the Queen 3 times every day. So they go, really? He goes, yeah, he sees. So they say, wow. Could we get a picture with him? Could you take a picture of us with the Queen, with this guy, this Queen's secretary? Could you take a picture of us? So the Queen took a picture of this couple with the secretary who knows the Queen. And then afterwards, the Queen said to the secretary, what her greatest wish is to see the look on this couple's face when they realized that this was the Queen. Okay, so the guy said, what's the Musar Haskell from the story? So sometimes we go to shul on Yom Kippur, right? And on Yom Kippur, we're caught up in klopping al chait and how good is the chazan and don't forget that we're there to see the king. Don't forget the secretaries are all there. We have to see the king. That's what it's really all about. I didn't understand exactly how I didn't recognize her. She's on every 20-pound note. In England, I guess out of con, she probably had her hat down. Whatever it was. At the end of the day, that's what we're going. We're going to Yom Kippur. The most important thing about Yom Kippur is, as difficult as it is it's trying. Listen, you don't feel that great. Try to enjoy the day. Try to enjoy the Yom Kippur. As difficult as it is, I certainly enjoy Motzei Yom Kippur more than Yom Kippur. That's the truth. But we have to try to enjoy the day. The more you focus on don't look at the clock. The more you look at the clock, the longer the day takes. That's what happens. All right, so everybody have a Gemara Chasima Tov, have a good fast.